Well, good morning and welcome to our March 27th, 2024 Left 2 board meeting and call it to order. And I'd like to start off by taking a moment of silence to remember our fallen brothers and sisters, not only in police and fire, but also our brothers and sisters in the military. Thank you very much. All right, so I do have a microphone announcement. For total transparency, please remember to turn your microphone on before speaking and addressing the board. Please also be aware to turn your microphone back off when you have finished speaking. And then a special little note says, Steve, please be quiet. I'm just kidding. Sorry. Wow. Can't help myself. Sorry.
Wow. The interim's off to a hot start.
That's right. And then for our individuals who are joining us virtually, when attending virtually, please make sure to unmute your computer or phone before speaking or addressing the board. When you have finished speaking, please then mute your device. Thank you. So, all right. Well, welcome. Good to see everybody. Great session. Thank you for your work. Looking at our list, our item number 1, which is our approval of the minutes. And I believe Senator Holy, AJ, Tarina.
Oh, yeah.
We got a good quorum. We're good?
Okay,
good. Well, welcome to all those online as well. So our first order of business is the approval of the minutes from December 2023 through February 2024, which have been posted as well as in your board packets.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes as mentioned. Discussion. Seeing or hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The minutes are adopted. Thank you very much. Mr. Nelson, item number 2, legislative session review.
All right. Jacob's going to go over with you, as you'll recall from your December meeting, the board proposed 5 different policy items for legislation. They ended up being split into 2 different bills and ultimately combined all into one bill, and Jacob will talk about that, but also go over with you some of the non-Left 2 board bills like part-time employment that passed and what that might mean for the board this upcoming interim. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Jacob.
Okay, good morning. For the record, Jacob, staff to the board. Start off with what ended up being referred to as the Left 2 Omnibus Bill, Senate Bill 6197. I'm gonna real quickly just go over what this bill did again. So it removes the statute of limitations for applying for the special death benefit. It clarified the definition of firefighter. It shifted responsibility for paying back overpayments due to employer error from the member to the employer. And then it converted certain PTSD non-duty disability retirees to duty disability. It didn't actually convert them. It gave them the opportunity to reapply and be considered for duty disability if they'd been approved for non-duty disability. And then it also it started off as a separate bill, but got added to this bill and then narrowed the scope of it, giving the Left 2 board authority over policy staff salaries. So once again, that originally started as giving the Left 2 board authority over all staff salaries, but was narrowed to just policy staff. And I should add with that we will be, Steve and I will, board staff will be working with DRS on the implementation of all these different parts. Before the governor had signed it, we had our monthly meeting with DRS, and at that time, we didn't push them on what the plan was. I figured we'd give them till it was at least signed into law by the governor before. But we know they're working with their project team to assign out these different topics, and we'll be following up with them on implementation and following up with the board on how that goes and any issues that come up. So next, some legislation that did not pass affecting Left 2. Like I just said, 6198 was the bill that was regarding the employees of the Left 2 board and giving the board salary authority. That was amended into the other bill. And then there was the month of death bill, which was not endorsed by the Left 2 board this time around. Instead, the board voted to support it instead. So we did sign in support of that bill, but it ended up not passing. There was a separate, there was a related PEB issue that also came out of the month of death. It was impacted by month of death. And so that was resolved in a separate piece of legislation. And that has a very small impact. There's not a lot of Left 2 members in PEB. But the month of death issue for pensions did not move forward this session. So I will bring that up in the next presentation also about options for the board this interim. And then the budget, not a lot in the budget to talk about other than just always like to let the board know that it was, that the Left Plan 2 was fully funded, that the appropriations made by the legislature do reflect the pension rates that were adopted by the board. And that DRS did receive funding to implement the Left 2 board bill. And then some agency budget items there on the bottom of the slide. So other bills of interest, flexible work policies for law enforcement officers. So we did talk about this bill last year and then also this year, and it did pass this year. And it did make a change to the definition of law enforcement officer. So that's going to take some change for those of us who work in Left 2 in policy to get used to. It's always full-time, fully compensated, but that is no longer the case for law enforcement. Now you can be part-time and be eligible for Left 2. And so that bill did a lot of other things around flexible work for law enforcement, allowing part-time law enforcement officers, and that included, one hurdle to that has always been that part-time, you had to be full-time, a law enforcement officer had to be full-time to be commissioned. There was kind of an exception to that you're a law enforcement officer, once they were commissioned, they could be part-time for a year before that commission lapsed and they were no longer commissioned. And so this also changed that law, allowing part-time officers to be commissioned. And I know there were some questions last month when I spoke to this in front of the board. So I guess I'll pause now to see if there's any questions from the board on this bill.
Any questions? Okay. All right. Thanks.
And I will just say it is a bill that we've been in discussions with DRS on. They're considering rulemaking, and we will be involved in that and keep an eye on how this bill goes and report back to the board if there are any issues that are unforeseen issues that arise from it. And then there was another bill that was regarding pre-LEF and funeral cost. Firefighters received, pre-LEF firefighters, their survivors received a $500 stipend or payment to reimburse funeral costs, while law enforcement officers received $1,000. And so this was, I believe, brought to at least our attention by the Association of Washington Cities. And so legislation was ran this year, and it did pass to raise the firefighter level to $1,000 to match law enforcement officers. And then some other bills that we kept an eye on this session that ended up not passing, but just wanted to touch on briefly. One was to expand the definition of veteran. And so this would have included a broader group of medals. It would have expanded it to service medals. And the actuaries did do a fiscal note on that, and we tried to help them with gathering information quickly on that issue. And so they had it as a 4 basis point increase to LEF if this would have passed, which is a total of around $51 million over 25 years. That bill, I believe it received one hearing, but didn't go anywhere from there. And And then there was another one establishing a law enforcement officer retirement medical trust plan. This bill did not receive a hearing, but it would have put the board in charge of, it would have allocated $50 million, plus had minimum employer contribution requirements, and would have put the Left 2 board in charge of developing criteria for the distribution of those funds. So it was kind of an interesting one we hadn't seen in the past. And then another one was House Bill 2167, which was a part-time retiree return to work. And this one would have created a similar rules for LEF as the other plans, as far as allowing retirees to return to work for 1,040 hours a year. So they would be able to do that while continuing to receive their retirement benefit. But this one did not move forward.
Jacob?
Yeah.
On Senate Bill 6022, who is the primary sponsor?
Ooh.
You know, I mean, I can look it up. I didn't know if you knew.
Yeah, I have forgotten.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll find it. Thank you.
Okay, so that completes my presentation. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Chair. Jacob, on the authority over policy staff salaries, can you just talk about what you know about what the discussion was with why it landed there, and why the board wasn't given broader authority there?
I think I'll ask Steve to jump in on this one.
Yeah. So there was a similar bill to what the board proposed for the SIB years ago, and that bill did not pass. And the discussion was, if we didn't do it for the SIB, we're not going to do it for you, to kind of put it bluntly. And then from there, it then transitioned. So initially there was concern whether the bill would even get a hearing. Then it was like, well, for the SIB, they do have certain positions for which there is no comparable positions in other state agencies, like the investment officers. And the policy folks at the board, their peers really are legislative staff rather than agency staff. And so they felt like they could make an exception for those positions, since their peers are not in the executive branch. But that was the extent of the discussion on that.
I appreciate the explanation. So I'll just put it out there for the rest of the board that as we head towards next session, I'm still not satisfied with the outcome here, and would love to have some more continued conversations around this particular item.
Thank you, Jake. Any other comments or questions?
I do want to jump in. Tim passed me a napkin with the answer to your previous question. Senator Fortunato.
What's that?
Senator Fortunato.
Okay.
Thank sponsor you. That.
I think he's gearing up for number 3.
Yeah. Any other questions on that one before we move on?
Yeah. We'll be jumping into 2024 interim preview, and it looks like Jacob's going to do that as well.
Yeah, Jacob, just go for it.
Okay. Start with just going over the actuarial topics for the interim. So the results of the actuarial valuation, and then the audit of that. I believe Milliman will be doing that audit again this year, and then the contribution rate preview, and then the contribution rate adoption.
So this is a rate setting year for the board. Rates were frozen the last time you had this discussion, but this will be the first time since the passage of the benefit improvement bill that rates will not be frozen.
Then administrative topics. Not going to go through all of these, but did want to just draw your attention to number 2 on the list, because it'll be the first time that the board has this as a topic, which is the salary setting responsibility connected to the passage of the bill we just spoke about, giving the board authority over the policy staff. So board staff has already been working on determining what exactly the options for the board are in relation to that bill. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else on here unexpected. It's a typical administrative topics the board is used to.
Are there any questions about any of those, though?
Go ahead, Jay.
Just other than with item number 2, obviously it seems like there's an opportunity there for us to have some continued discussion, not only just on the policy setting or salary setting for policy staff, but maybe just talk about other alternatives to get at the bigger issue we had around staff salary setting. I don't have a solution in mind, but I think there's an opportunity there with that topic to have more conversation.
I think that as maybe even part of number 10, the strategic planning of where we go as an organization that can kind of put together. And then, of course, maybe not putting them in the hot seat, but, relying on our elected officials to provide some insight on, their thoughts on why or why not those things can happen at some point. We don't need to do it now, but when we start talking about it, there's obviously things that happen behind the scenes we don't know. So,
yeah, I hope I didn't say anything inappropriate in my. Okay.
We can start over if you'd like.
Too late.
Oh. Are there other questions? We're just talking about administrative topics. Okay. Thanks, Jacob.
Okay, now on to the benefit topics. Just as a reminder, the types of briefings that the board can receive on benefit topics. The main one is the top briefings to work towards proposing legislation. Typically, there's a 3-step process of an initial consideration, comprehensive report, and then a final proposal. The board can also receive educational briefings. Usually there's 1 or 2 of those topics a year. And those are ones just to gather additional information. And sometimes those educational briefings can lead to then the proposing legislation briefings, either that same year or in the following year. So some possible benefit topics. I'm going to go through each, just put this up here, but I'm going to go through each of these on the following slides. Just to say, these are not set in stone. Obviously, additional ones can be considered, and we'll go over those in next month. So start with holiday payments. So the current administrative interpretation of when holiday pay is considered earnable compensation has created a situation where some members can be treated differently based on their employer payroll system and how sophisticated that system is. At least that was a concern that the board looked into last year. And the board did receive at least 1 policy briefing. I can't remember if I did 1 or 2 policy briefings on that topic last year. The board ended up asking DRS during the meeting if they would be willing to do rulemaking to take their employer notice and put that into rule. DRS said they would. And so the board asked for a follow-up this year on the status of that and whether DRS followed through with that and if there was any other issues related to that topic. And so we have been working with DRS. They are doing rulemaking on that topic. And so plan with this one is for board staff to provide an update to the board for possible workload. I had 3 policy briefings up there. That probably won't be necessary. I think it would either be an educational briefing or possibly just provided by Steve in the admin update, the status of how that rulemaking is going with DRS. Another one from last year was authorized leave of absence service credit, being able to purchase that at retirement. So this started off as a different issue, and the more we dug into it last year, we worked our way down to the underlying cause of the issue being that it had to do with how people on temporary duty disability were treated differently than people on temporary non-duty disability. And understandably, there is a policy difference between being out on duty disability versus non-duty disability, but there was this kind of catch-22 issue for people on non-duty disability not being able to purchase service credit. It was one thing to have that purchase service credit cost less for people on duty disability and cost more for someone on non-duty disability, but people on non-duty disability could get caught in a situation where they were not eligible to even purchase that service credit. And so that came down to, if you were trying to do authorized leave of absence purchase service credit, that you're barred from doing that if you don't return to work. And so the board last year talked about, at the end of that presentation, talked about this interim studying whether that should be an option, whether people on authorized leave of absence who do not return back to their job should be eligible to purchase service credit or not. So if the board does move forward with that topic, it would be a policy topic with potentially 3 briefings. And I should say that that authorized leave of absence service credit affects more people than just those on non-duty disability. There are other situations where people are eligible for that, but we could dig into that later. And then this one's a new issue, concurrent employment, that came from correspondence from a member. They were working as a full-time firefighter at one employer, and then working additional time at another part-time at another employer as a firefighter, I believe a firefighter EMT. And so the issue that came out of that was that members who are working full-time for one employer and part-time for another employer may not be eligible for benefits from their second employer, including line of duty death and disability benefits. So that wasn't exactly the issue the member called about, but it was something, the more we kind of looked into that was a concern that came up, was that if that person was injured or killed at that other employer and it's not left employment, what benefits would they be eligible for? Would they not be eligible for the left 2 benefits? So if the board moves forward with this one, it would be a policy topic and potentially at least 3 briefings.
Jacob, can I ask just?
Yeah.
So on this, and I know we had our administrative meeting this morning, we talked a little bit about this. We have, as Steve described, as a person comes in for pension purposes, you would have a volunteer potentially as a firefighter, a full-time left, or a PERS.
Yes.
And so could you have a situation where a left 2 member is also a volunteer who gets paid as a volunteer? Would that jeopardize potentially their line of duty death and their disability benefits?
So that'll be one of the things that we'll talk about. And I am aware of at least one issue in the past where full-time firefighters in one local were working as volunteers in neighboring locals. But at least they were being reported in the volunteer system. So if something had happened, they would have had whatever the volunteer benefits are. The part of this concurrent employment question had to do with apparently this guy wasn't being reported in any system. And so we're trying to figure out if that's a mistake or if there is some gap in coverage. Jacob and I'll need to work with the Volunteer Fire Board on their eligibility and coverage issues and how those are, brought forward. You can be paid as a volunteer. But that'll be part of that initial briefing on this, is explaining sort of how it's all supposed to work, or how we understand it's supposed to work, and then figure out if in fact there are any gaps. And then it'll be up to you guys to decide whether you want to move forward on closing any gaps or not.
Okay, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. This is one of those subjects that just drives me nuts because we've had people. Why would a part-time employer want to take on the responsibility of the duty of death or dismemberment or OJI with no consequence? Because that's what would happen. Because we've had people before volunteer in another organization and they get hurt and they think their primary boss or employer is going to pick up that cost. So I thought we had addressed this 20 years ago, and it sounds like this might have, everybody just went back to their corners and started playing nice and not doing this. But it sounds like some of the employers have found ways around the rules again, or hoping they're not going to get caught again. So to my position, those, if you take the responsibility to hire somebody not at the full-time rate, and I'm not sure what the volunteer rate is. I don't know what the salary range is for a volunteer, whether it's $5 or $500 to work a shift. But either way, it's creating a problem, not only for us, but for the retirement plan, for L&I, and any other medical that's out there, because what a part-time volunteer organization pays for medical costs, premiums, versus what a full-time employer is paying for medical costs. That's also another financial. And if they're scamming the system, I think we need to get on it and try and stop them before they do it. If it's legit, that's one thing. But we're always having people looking for ways around to hire people at the rate they're supposed to be hired at, and other people just trying to make a couple bucks because they like what they do. So I'm hoping that's where we're going to go with this.
Yeah, well, step one is for Jacob and I to learn more about the Vol Fire system. What does it take to be eligible for Vol Fire? And then also sort of that transition of at what point in time, because they have, there's a separate board that administers the volunteer fire system, and then DRS administers PERS. So if you're working enough hours to be eligible for PERS, that'll be something we'll follow up with DRS. But what happens if somebody's maybe in that gray area where they're not quite eligible for PERS, but maybe they're not being reported in volunteer either? Who's supposed to be on top of that? And are there people in that are there gaps there, or are there people playing the system in that gray area? And what does that look like? That's what we'll be looking into to begin with, Pat.
Okay, and I'm willing, seeing as how I represent fire commissioners in the state sitting on this board, and the fire commissioners and the fire chiefs are in the same building and have the same administrative staff. If you need me to do some research within the fire commissioners and the fire chiefs, because that's where the volunteer plans are housed, and if you have questions that you want me to ask directly to the executive, I can do that. And I think that's, if we need to start doing that, this is one of those things that I think it's time to shine a light on these people and figure out what they're doing. I'm not saying it's the fire commissioners and not the fire chiefs, the associations, but it's the employers within the state that are trying to scam the system, if that's what they're trying to do. And I want to make sure that I'm very clear that that's not what's going on. But if it is what they're trying to do, we need to stop it as soon as possible. Okay, thank you. Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Daryl.
I guess you had talked that you and Jacob would be able to explore this a little further. I think somehow or another we need to educate, because if maybe there's a firefighter who's unsuspecting doing this, and if God forbid something happened to him, is he thinking he can go back to his original agency where he's working and draw off of that, for instance, of PTSD? Because if you get two employers that are going to be fighting over, you got it, no, you got it. So maybe an education piece for the worker too might be something to explore.
Yeah. And that can apply even in PERS as well. We already are aware of, part-time people who are working as, say, EMTs that don't have quite the same benefits, and the duty-related benefits and PERS are very different from LEF. But issue number one is just finding out, being able to come back to you and do a presentation on how it's all supposed to work statutorily, and whether or not during the course of that we're either finding out that mistakes are being made or that there's gaps, one or the other, or both.
Jay, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I see both sides of this, and I appreciate Pat and Daryl's lens on this too. But, as the employer rep, my initial concern would be if I'm the primary full-time employer, not getting stuck paying for a bill for an injury that might have happened as part of the part-time work. On the other side of things, caring about a person, I'm really concerned that someone would take on a very dangerous job full-time and get hurt and lack coverage to take care of themselves. I think there's a big risk there for an individual too. So I think, to Daryl's point, there's some education that may need to happen for those that do take on dual roles, and making sure there is clarity amongst the employers around all this. I think there's a lot of pieces to this puzzle that need some resolution.
Thank you, Jay. And Wolf, I think you're on. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'd underscore the comments about education. I think we have for good or ill, a mind-bogglingly complex system that's now encountering a mind-bending level of turnover and succession within our administrative staff in just about every level of government, but especially in local government and counties in particular, where we just have a hard time recruiting to fill critical vacancies, and we don't have sufficient capacity to have overlap in duties. So the training component and the educational component is essential at every level, and whatever we can do to help educate both our members, but also people who are administering programs, so that we can accomplish the tasks and we can do these things properly and fairly and accurately, I think is going to be a benefit to all.
All right. Thank you, Wolf. Other comments? All right.
Okay.
Jacob, thank you.
So next one, won't explain what the issue is. We've talked about it already, but month of death. So this bill ended up not passing. And so the board would have the option to consider the bill again, look at some alternative options. Like I mentioned, there was an alternative option that was passed related to PEB. So the board could consider to study this issue again, and that would be potentially 3 policy briefings. And at this point, haven't heard whether this bill did come from DRS, whether they're going to consider do an agency request legislation or what their plan is. And also the Select Committee on Pension Policy also endorsed it and have not had it. They haven't had their first meeting yet, but me and Steve do have monthly meetings with their policy staff and present at the Select Committee, updating them on what the board is doing on a monthly basis. So be able to report back to the board on if DRS or the Select Committee moves forward with this issue again. And then I mislabeled the title of this one, but this is supposed to be the DRS appeal deadlines. And so this was an issue the board looked at last year, and it had to do with a couple left 2 members had missed their deadline to file an administrative appeal with DRS and express concerns regarding a lack of clarity. And so the board motioned last year to consider studying this further this year. So it would be in front of the board again here. If the board did move forward, it would be potentially 3 policy briefings. Benchmarking. This was another topic that the board discussed last interim. Ended up having such a full agenda last interim that this ended up not doing benchmarking, but wanted to put this in front of the board again this year. It really came from the board has received benchmarking as far as where how Left 2 compares to other plans around the country. In particular, a concern that was previously studied was the benefit members were receiving and how that compared. And so there was some discussion of whether that should be updated after the benefit enhancement passed to see where the plan stands compared to other plans around the country. And so if the board did move forward with that, it would be one educational briefing.
Jacob, on the educational briefing, would that be just providing us information on like how long this would look at? Because I know this is pretty complicated to do.
Yeah.
So would this be just report back saying that, hey, we're going to reach out to these states, or this will, this is what this is going to entail? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out. I don't think you can. I mean, this can take you a lot of time to do something like this.
Yeah, we'll talk. So you don't have to take any action now.
Yeah.
But in fairness, yes. When you say one educational briefing, all educational briefings are not equal, and the amount of work that would actually go into the benchmarking peer comparison is substantial. The last time we did it, we looked at not only statewide plans, but a whole host of city plans. It involved going out and looking at their most recent actuarial valuations to get their funded status and those kind of things, and trying to update what benefits may have changed for all of those plans as well. I say the last table had well over 50 plans, and it might have had 80 plans that we were benchmarked against. So maybe you'll, again, no action today. When we talk about this in the next couple of months as you adopt your plan, maybe there's some stripped down versions that you'd want to consider, or maybe it's just it's not worth the work. That'll be up to you guys.
All right. Thank you.
So this would be a new topic, the Ombudsman Program Review. This would be an opportunity for the board to receive, and I know the board is aware of the Ombudsman Program, and I think a lot of you hear from your members about the benefits and support they receive through that program. And so this would be an opportunity for the board to receive more information about what the board's ombuds office does, the services they provide, and then the data that they have regarding more specifics of who they're providing help to, what that help is, and how many members they're working with. And so that would be an educational briefing.
Right.
If I could offer maybe a suggestion or something, law enforcement's kind of unique. We have several groups that represent us, and not all the agencies participate in those groups. And I know that our ombudsmen have been out to particular groups and given their presentations. What I'm kind of worried about are maybe those groups that aren't available to participate in those. Maybe something to consider would be in the newsletter. All the cops get their newsletters. Maybe a outline of what the ombudsman program does, the contact information of that, or maybe even a suggestion of a video on the left site, and meet our ombudsman and then provide that information. Having used our ombudsman in the past, and I know the program very well, I get inundated with calls from people I don't even know or have never met. My name gets passed around. This guy will help you out. I kick them to our ombudsman, of course, but I think for law enforcement, it's a little difficult for us to get that training or that review of what the program is and how it can help.
Okay. And I should add, another benefit of the board doing this one is I will not be providing this update. The ombudsman will be providing this update. So a good break from me.
Sorry to put that work on you guys.
Yes. Okay. We'll move to the next one. Oh, so that's all that's on the list for now. No actions required at this meeting. as I said at the beginning of this, board members still have opportunity to provide additional topics to be considered for the agenda. And then the board will likely adopt the agenda at next month's meeting.
Any other questions for Jacob? Not seeing any. All right. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Mr. Nelson, item number 4.
Let me start off the admin update by talking about correspondence that the board received, because it's kind of a nice segue from Jacob's presentation about the interim. There was a message to the board from a Left to retiree concerned about how the amount of inflation that was banked would, how long it would take for that to play out. That correspondence was shared with the board. My response will be shared with the board as well. But that is a topic, how the COLA works, and in particular how the COLA works given the recent higher than expected inflation. That was a topic that the board has had briefings on in the past, and that might also be something that you would consider having an educational briefing on that this interim. But for purposes of correspondence, I wanted to mention that had come in, has been shared with all of you, and my response to the member will be shared with all of you as well.
So Jacob just went through that list.
Yeah.
So how would we add this to that list of at least an informational, some sort of education on that?
Yeah, we'll have that on the draft list for you at your next meeting when you start doing your workload planning and get feedback from you then.
Okay.
Okay. Next up on the admin update is outreach activities. The State Council of Firefighters has their educational seminar coming up in Vancouver, and we will have a table there, and Tammy will be presenting on the Ombudsman program as well at that conference.
Hold on there.
All right, we'll get that straightened out then. Oh yeah, okay. Tammy's going to be presenting at which group are you talking to that same day? Seattle, that's right. Okay, and then we'll have an outreach table at the educational conference. Thank you, Tammy, for reminding me of that. Then the International Association or International Ombudsman Association recently had their annual conference. Both Jessica and Tammy attended that. NCPERS, as another reminder, has their upcoming annual conference in Seattle. So if you are looking for trustee education but travel is a concern, then you might want to consider NCPERS. That's a fine conference. Their educational stuff is pre-approved, so you can contact us if you're interested in attending that conference. The next meeting of the Left To board is April 24th. And so we'll start getting you in the pipeline on the rate adoption, and we'll also then start working on the clarifying what you want to work on this interim. But that'll be the kind of the start to the of the interim, is getting that either your work plan adopted and getting you going on the rate adoption for July.
So Steve, was there a concern on travel to Seattle for NCPERS in the way of distance and whether you stay at a hotel or would you have to travel on a daily basis there?
No, you can get approved for hotel.
Okay, thank you.
There's one available in Kent. Sorry, can't help myself.
Are there any questions about the administrative update?
Questions for Steve? Not seeing any, Steve.
Okay.
All right, so we are scheduled to be back on the 24th of April.
Not January,
I'm sorry. Who's got a hand up?
next meeting.
I'm sorry. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it says January 24th. All right, see y'all next year. Workload just got real light. Way to go, Steve.
Nice.
All right, we are scheduled for April 24th at 9:30, and we'll have an administrative meeting, I assume, at 8:30 that morning as well. And we'll look for the correspondence from Chloe. So, yeah, good. All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed. All right, we are adjourned. All right, thank you, everyone.